So I am now recording, and I am now going to share screen and spend some time talking about more of the ordinance side of it. So we did a little bit of work looking at the ordinances last time, right? Better? All right. What are ordinances again? Refresh my memory.
Local law.
Right. Local law. It's the mechanism by which a township can tell you you can't do that. Are they so stringent that you can never get any relief from them? No. Okay, so this is important. If you don't have a pen and pencil out, I do want you to write this down or remember this somehow. Okay. Remember, there's two ordinances. There's a zoning ordinance and a subdivision and land development. Now, this isn't explicitly written. This is just something that you sort of get a feel for over time. They are both ordinances, they are both laws, right?
Can you say the second one again?
Zoning and subdivision and land development ordinance. Subdivision and land development ordinance. It's an acronym. In short, it's SALDO, S-A-L-D-O, subdivision and land development ordinance. SALDO. Okay. The more restrictive of the two is the zoning ordinance. They are both laws and guidelines, but the one that, if you had to ask for permission to deviate from that rule, you're more likely to get permission to deviate from a SALDO requirement than from a zoning requirement. Okay. To get permission to not follow a zoning ordinance, you need something called a variance. Right? Variance gives you permission to deviate from the zoning ordinance within a very strict framework. You have to be very specific about what you're asking for permission not to meet, and you have to prove a hardship. Do you think that a financial hardship is enough of an argument? Exactly. Well, I don't want to protect that wetland. I want to build my bridge there because it's going to save me $5 million. That's not a hardship. It's still a valuable resource that needs to be protected. So you're not going to get, that's kind of a stupid example, but you get the idea.
Let's take an example of like a viable hardship.
The funny thing with that is it kind of boils down to a matter of interpretation. A good one would be it's a pre-existing condition. Right? The house is already inside of the building setback because it's a farmhouse that was built in 1886 and the road came in after that. That would be an example. That would almost be a wiffle ball. Like they would almost have to grant that. Okay. So this gives you permission to deviate from the zoning.
Okay. Was the zoning ordinance the one that like specified size and everything like that?
Yeah, but more importantly, it specifies use. So like it gives you permission to build, I don't know, if you had your own choice of a side hustle, Okay, so you want to open your own restaurant or bake shop or whatever. Okay. Do you think you would get permission to do that in a residential neighborhood? Possibly. It depends on the framework, right? If it's a huge restaurant, if it's a 600-seat restaurant, probably not. But if it's a small catering business that you're gonna run out of your garage, maybe you could make that argument. Permission to go and deviate from a zoning ordinance requires you to go to the zoning hearing board, and it is almost like a court hearing where both sides make an argument. Usually the argument against is just the board is asking you questions about how you're going to limit your ask, right? So what I mean by that is you can't ask for permission to deviate from everything. You want to deviate from it, but you want to deviate from it in the most minimal amount possible within reason. That makes sense? There's a stenographer, like it's recorded, there's motions. It's almost like a court hearing, but a lighter version. But still, there's testimony, and that testimony is on the record. So you have to hold to that going forward. Make sense? To deviate from the saldo, so that's a variance. To deviate from the saldo, you ask for a waiver. Okay, if you can't meet something in a saldo, then you ask for a waiver from it. So it's kind of the same thing. It's asking for permission to deviate from that accepted law. One grants you permission to deviate from the zoning ordinance, the other one grants you permission to deviate from the saldo. Make sense? Okay. When we looked at the zoning ordinance last time, I don't need to bring it up again, do I? One of the things that was in there was the minimum lot size in the zone that we're looking at. Am I okay to switch topics now that we've discussed waivers and variances and saldo and zoning? Okay. We looked last time, I think the minimum lot size was what, 12,000 square feet or 24,000 square, whatever it was. Well, let's bring it up. Won't take long. Lower Macungie Township. That's where we were, right? And ordinances. There's the subdivision, and there's the zoning. Anybody remember what zoning use we were in? Suburban. There we go. So 12,000 square foot. Get out your calculators. You have a 12,000 square foot minimum lot size, and they're telling you that the minimum width of your lot is 80 feet. Yeah. Sorry. Somebody call out a number. What was it? 150. What does that number represent?
The maximum length of one side.
The minimum length of one side to get to 12,000 with an 80-foot wide lot.
Oh,
You
yeah.
with me?
Yes.
So if you're a greedy little duck and you want to get the maximum amount of lots, is that bad? I mean, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but isn't the client that you're working for most likely going to want the maximum amount of units they can get?
Yeah.
It's business, but don't forget what we talked about last time, sustainable development and keeping those things. Okay. So your minimum would be what, 150, somebody said?
Yeah.
150 by 80. Okay, so can I erase this? So if this is my property, and I have two long lines here, and I wanted to do a roadway. How would you do it? What would make the most sense, knowing that you're in this ordinance and what would you do if this was, like, would you put your road out here along the lot?
No, you
What?
put your road down the middle, and then the lot's on the other side.
So I would take this line and I would offset, right? That's the actual command in AutoCAD. But you draw a parallel line, how far off? What was that?
100 minimum lot.
150, right?
Or if you wanted to make them long lines, you could do it 80. But
Everybody see where Davis is going with that logic? Okay, I understand what you're saying, but expand on it a little more.
well, it depends on which way you would have to turn the lots to get the most in there without having either extra space, or you have some lots that are bigger than others. If it was easier to fit them long ways, you can make them 80 from the road and then have the lots be more horizontally long.
So you're optimizing it basically. For
Right.
lots.
Right. Keep one thing in mind, that width, right? So if this is my road, lot width goes parallel to the road.
But it's still minimum, so you do, still do 120.
You can still do bigger and get fewer lots.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can do 150 and then 80 long.
No.
Or 80 high.
Okay.
Well, because, yes, yeah, if you can build a house in that footprint, you can make it 150 by 80. Yes,
You just
Yep.
have a backyard, you have a side yard.
correct. Right? Everybody follow where we went there. Okay. So some of the other information that you're going to need to start thinking about your subdivision. I'm going to post the CAD file for the existing features plan. You're going to have a CAD file of this boundary and topo and a bunch of other things. But some other things to consider. We need more information about the road. Agreed? What would be helpful to know about the road? Yeah, yeah.
That's a required reading.
Now, I'm going to give you all of this information, but what I want to do is das cross section, yeah. So if I took a big saw and I cut the road and I looked in at it, this is what you would see. Exactly. Cross sections are something that's pretty common in pretty much most civil land development applications, right? You have roadway cross sections, you have cross sections for utilities. Sometimes you can put the stuff together. Cross sections are pretty common. What does this represent? Yeah.
Is that what the distance between the lots? Between the lots?
Right. So ROW, right, stands for right of way. That's basically what the municipality, city, borough, whatever the government entity is, that's what they're going to own. If you live in a more rural area where the road developed from an old horse trail or an old cart trail that developed over time, okay, where it wasn't constructed, the deed sometimes goes to the center of the road. Does that mean you own the road? No. The right of way is still there. The public still has permission to use them. You can kind of pretend I'm Charlie Brown's teacher for the next 30 seconds because this is more of an advanced survey topic. You have two types of right of way. You have fee simple right of way, right? And then you have the older right of way, okay? Where it's more of an easement. Fee simple is what we do now. You're basically dedicating from here to here and saying this belongs to town A or municipality B or whoever, right? They own that. Okay. Back on, pay attention. Okay, sidebar over. Your right of way width is going to be 50 feet. Then they tell you in that 50 feet, this is what we want. Okay. So for most residential projects, for housing projects, whether it's townhouses or twins, or somebody had another term for half a double, duplex, same animal, right? Different words for the same thing. The township specifies what they want in that 50 feet. Okay, and they kind of show you what they want in that 50. From going from left to right, they want a sidewalk, they want a curb, they want the road, they want another sidewalk. But in here, anybody have an idea why they want a foot? Why they want the sidewalk a foot inside of the right of way, what they own?
That way they can expand it if they want to.
That's a good possibility. But I'm thinking more of a practical construction standpoint.
Would it be for like drainage or pipe?
Maybe, Nico?
So when you construct it, you're not on people's property.
Mm,
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you need to like, alter it, you can say whatever you have space. So that we share it.
Both Kaylee and Nico are pretty much spot on. It's a practical thing. Like, you're relying on somebody to build that, but they're probably building it from something else. So it's to allow for construction precision. So if the sidewalk kind of wanders a little bit, it still should be for the most part in this room.
I'm kind of confused, if it's like, whatever, or sidewalks, why are there so many lines of sidewalks?
Because those were done before the sidewalk was possibly a requirement. Sometimes, if I develop one side of the road, not the other, okay, I can't tell you to put a sidewalk through there. Like, if you own the other side of the road, I can't force you to build a sidewalk there. Unless you come in and say, I want to do something with my property, then the township can say, okay, to do that, we now want sidewalk construction. Or in some cases, what they'll do is they'll defer it. That doesn't mean you never have to do it. What it means is for some areas where, like you said, there is no sidewalk, until they get a long enough stretch or a long enough length, and there's like 5 properties, they'll say, you don't have to build it until we have sidewalks for the whole corridor, then we'll make it. So it really depends on ownership and whether or not they can force you to do it. So if it's from scratch, then you have to follow this. Unless you have permission to deviate. Could you ask for a waiver from putting sidewalks in? Maybe. Would they be likely to grant it? What do we think?
If it's a waiver, it's more likely.
Then the other one variance, but probably not.
What if it's, you have a relative that wants to give you and a brother and sister just 3 lots? Do we need a sidewalk for those 3? If it's in a rural area? So you understand how that it could be a discussion point with the different township representatives and say, do we really need this? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Or if you're only doing, say, 10 houses, would it be an acceptable compromise to put the sidewalk on the side where the 10 houses are gonna be and not do sidewalk on the other side? Possibly. So there's different possibilities.
Do these laws come into effect with private neighborhoods? Or is that only public? Because I know there are a lot of neighborhoods where I live where there's just a street, there's no sidewalks.
Right,
But there
so what you're dealing with there is, it's called a homeowners association.
Okay.
So you pay, in addition to buying your lot, you pay an annual, or like, you could say, okay, we'll set it up that you pay for all 25, 30 years all up front.
Sure.
Or you could do it however they set it up.
Okay.
It gives the other people in the development some reassurances that certain things are and aren't gonna happen. My neighbor is never gonna paint their house hot pink. Not that hot pink's not a cool color. Or you can't park your RV in your driveway. You need to build enough garage that you can have an RV, but you need to park it so that it's under roof and out of eye. So the homeowners association can do more restrictive things, or we've done developments where it's age restricted,
Yeah.
55 and older. Sidewalks aren't that big a deal.
Yeah.
But in this development, they wanted a 9-hole, half of a golf course. So the houses were built around the holes. So they made the roadway slightly wider, no sidewalks, but they had an additional 6-foot cart lane for the golf carts, because almost all of the people in the community had a golf cart rather than, they might have had one car to go and get groceries or other things, but it was more common that you're gonna have golf carts on the front. So it depends on the dynamics.
Yeah.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna assume this is a subdivision that you're gonna have lots on both sides. You gotta do the sidewalks on both sides. You've gotta follow this crossing. So this is the standard. You would have to ask permission to deviate. But what we're gonna do is assume that you have to follow this. Okay? So you come in a foot, you do a 4-foot sidewalk, then you have a 5-foot space. You have the 5-foot space to be able to put in street trees. In a perfect world, is 5 feet enough space for a tree? It depends, right? Do you ever go to a big shopping center where they made a little tiny 3-foot space, and the shopping center's been there for 20 years and the tree's still this high? You need to give the thing enough room to grow, right? The poor thing is in the middle of an island, in the middle of a heat sink. Yeah, it grew maybe 3 inches. So 5 feet, it's a little better, but is it? Wow, that looks natural. Trees every 50 feet.
Yeah, but like also, like, if you have a huge tree and like a storm comes down, you have like a tree in the middle of it, like that's a whole like other like cost just because you want a bigger tree for a little bit.
There's always pros and cons. There's always a balance.
I don't want redwoods, but, like,
So did everybody see that this kind of thing is somewhat dated? Like, there's other ways to sort of naturalize this and make it better and improve it. Okay, so then you have the roadway itself where you're gonna drop. So the car would be going this way or going this way. Okay, everybody see that? Does anybody remember what we call that when the road is sloped from the center out like that? I had a term for it. I'm sorry? That's for super elevated. That's for all pitched one way. Crown. It's crown. It's sloped one way to the other. That's a little important. That's not a fun fact. That's kind of important. So the road is crowned. Some people got that. Some people didn't. Okay. 3% is a measure of slope, it's rise over run, times 100%. And then 1/4 inch per foot, it's sloped back into the road, and it's sloped this way. So everybody sees that everything is sloped this way to the curb line. Here's
Is the crown, the grade of the crown, does that follow the same laws as banks, so that they can only be as the height of 30%?
It needs to be constructed to exactly 3.
Oh,
So it's not a minimum or a maximum. That's what the road is built for. Now, when you go out after the fact with like a survey level, is it gonna be bang on 3% at every location? No, you know, you're dealing with a paving machine. You might get 3.5%, you might get 2.5%. The reason it's 3 is so that you get slope going out to the curb. You get positive drainage out to the curb line from the center of the road. Where are we gonna put our drainage features in the roadway? Are we gonna put our inlets or catch basins in the middle of the road? On the sides? Anybody ever see the pictures? Can I erase? Anybody ever see one of those? And then the curb continues in both directions, and this is built into the curb. They call these inlets. Okay. In PennDOT terminology, this is called a C-top inlet. I have no idea why C. There's another one called an M. It's exactly the same thing, but it doesn't have the curb on it. If you can figure out why it's a C and an M, I got nothing. Okay. Everybody follow that on your first layout for your road. Right. All offsetting is a simple command where you can just take a line that's there and offset it the direction you want, some known distance. We'll get to that in the tutorial. But what was my lot width? Let's assume 150. It could be 80, but then you got to do 150 the other way. Okay. And then what's my width of my street? 50. And then I can go another 150. Is what I have left. Can I get another street? Can I build a little connecting street?
Like in this case, wouldn't you want to like have the house like back to back, kind of like a street, like the edge of your lot? Right?
Well, if we build a second row of houses back here, you have to have a street there. So if I have a street here and I have enough space to go 150, 150, and then build my second street and double road and have lots on both sides. Yeah, that's typically what we do. That's also typically how a parking lot's laid out. You usually have an aisle and a double stacked row of spaces. Then an aisle. And then out at the perimeter, you have parking and then a row and then usually a double row. Right? Make sense? Everybody with me so far? So this kind of lays out your first blush looking at your subdivision. What we're going to do eventually is we're going to get the center line of this road, but kind of get an idea of how your layout's going to happen. Because eventually you're going to add this center line and you're going to offset it from one side or the other, 25 feet. And then you're going to have the center line of your road. That center line of your road is called an alignment. In CAD, it's called an alignment. Right? That alignment, if my existing road is out here, and this is the center line of my existing roadway, I'm going to extend my center line until the two center lines intersect. Then eventually what we're going to do is we're gonna define it as an alignment and station. What would make a logical starting station for the beginning of your road? There really isn't a wrong answer. I was actually looking for a number, but yeah, the end of this road is where it intersects the other road. So yes. Yeah, so, but what number would we give this? You could do 1,000, you could do 0. You could do 100. You can do 1,000. You're just making it a known reference. Does it make sense to make it, let's make it 5 plus 1736. Not really, I mean, you're making it some known starting. The only way it would make sense to have it be an oddball number, if this existing roadway already had stationing on it, like from a PennDOT, and you went and got the PennDOT right-of-way drawings and said, my future road is going to intersect the existing road at blah, blah, blah. Follow? Okay, so you need to know the road information. Am I going too quick? Everybody kind of following? Okay. Now, what are some other features that we need to have in our subdivision that we need to account for as civil engineers? But you guys haven't had the classes or the training or the background to know how to design it, but you should know possibly that you need. Chris, a detention basin. What's the purpose of the detention basin? What does it control? Runoff, stormwater. More specifically, a detention basin controls rate, Q, volume of water per time. Does a detention basin control volume? Typically, no. You look at its discharge point where it leaves the property. And as long as you're not exceeding Q, the flow rate per time, you're good. Rewind 20 years ago, that's all you had to worry about. We are now more in tune with sustainability, environmental concerns. So it brings in another layer to look at. Does anybody know what I'm kind of hinting to or getting to? So if we're controlling rate, what's something else that would make sense to control? If I'm controlling how fast the water is leaving the property. Time, yeah. How quickly? Right. That's kind of built in a little bit to the rate. Water quality, exactly. Water quality. Am I doing something to reduce total suspended solids? Yeah, environmental, right? Huh? Hey, Barlow for tying classes together now. I have a mutiny on my hand. Just recognize that there are features. There are features that control water quality. You're going to have to account for it, but you're not going to have to do designs of it. I'm going to tell you, you need to reserve so much of a space. You put the space where you want to put the space, but you need to conserve so much space to be able to design these features. What we're going to talk about on Monday is what those features are and where to find them. PADEP, everyone kind of okay with layout and right of way and stuff like that? Okay, the next thing that we're going to look at is what are those features that help you control water quality. The other thing they help you control is if we're controlling rate, how quickly it's leaving the site. Doesn't it also make sense to control volume? How much is leaving the site, or more specifically, how much we're keeping on our site? In Pennsylvania, we have the Department of Environmental Protection. What's the national entity that is above Pennsylvania? EPA, right? Clean Water Act. Yeah, environmental. PADEP is the EPA's arm for enforcing things on the state level. Make sense? PADEP has something, we love our acronyms, right?
Yeah.
PADEP, Department of Environmental Protection, has a BMP name. Have you guys looked at this in any classes yet? The BMP manual? We'll look at it in a little bit more detail on Monday. I do want you to start looking at the BMP manual, the zoning ordinance, and the South. We're going to look at it a little more, but get yourselves familiar with it. There's dozens of BMPs. BMP stands for Best Management Practices. Exactly. Where have you heard that before? Or you just kind of know it from? Good answer. You kind of get good at guessing acronyms once you like. Management procedures, that would be the other maybe possible buzzword. So that we can synthesize. I agree. I don't necessarily know that I agree with this. Is it better than what we've had before? Yeah, because we didn't have anything before. If you don't have anything, anything's an improvement. Well, all right. So there are items that control certain things. Okay. When you get to water resource engineering, okay, I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording.